so much for joining us during this momentary distraction of simple amusements and magic. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Faust & Company. My name is Chris Herren as Faust, and I'm your host today on episode 30 here on Faust & Company. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know you're all here for LUNA SHIMADA. She is waiting in the green room, and I can't wait to bring her on. We always have these wonderful conversations, and I'd love to continue it on here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll bring her on just real quickly here, but I like to say hello to everyone out there in the comments. I already saw Karen Underwood out there. I see Edward out here, and he says he's been waiting all week for this. So have I, Ed. So I can't wait to bring Luna on. So if you guys are out there, please say hello. Always like seeing you, and I always want to see the comments because I want you guys to know that this is live and not something that's pre-recorded. So it's my way of kind of interacting with all of you. But before we begin, I wanted to share a small video that my 7-year-old nephew made for me. He actually bought his first magic trick at Disneyland. He's 7 years old, and he's kind of dabbling in magic. So I wanted to give him something in return to kind of inspire him later on in life. And hopefully he can look back at this as something to be inspired on. So Cameron, if you're out there watching, this is for you. This is your magic debut in magic. And not only that, you're opening for one of the biggest and greatest magicians of our time, and that's LUNA SHIMADA. So Cameron, this is for you, and everyone out there, enjoy the video, and when we come back, we meet LUNA SHIMADA.
My name is Chris. I'm going to perform to you today with this new magic trick I got in Disneyland. I'm going to make the ball in my pocket reappear and disappear.
And that's the amazing Cameron, everyone. A round of threes for him if you're out there in the comments. Cameron, that was for you, my friend. And I'm just going to show a little bit of the comments out there. I can see that Cameron is there too. So Cameron, if you're out there, hello to you. I see Karen. Thank you for the applauses, everyone. And so without further ado, I'd like to give a small introduction to a dear friend of mine. And she really doesn't need an introduction from me at all, but I'll do my best. So our featured guest of the evening has been performing since she was 12 professionally and has been honing her craft for over 30 years. She has performed at Caesar's Palace and at the historical Moulin Rouge in Paris, and was the recipient of the World Magic Award for Best Female Magician. And she has definitely solidified her place in magic as one of the greatest female magicians of all time. This is my dear friend and great mentor, LUNA SHIMADA. Hello, Luna. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. It's always good seeing you, Luna. Now, before we begin, I know that the comments are coming in, and we talked about this before.
Already.
Already coming in just for you. So I'm gonna pull up. Jeff Davis is giving you a round of threes, I know, and also my wife Marita is giving you threes. Karen, Edward, and also Jeff Davis a second time for the threes. So,
Okay.
so you have a very warm welcome from everyone
Nice.
out there.
Thank
So
you.
once again, Luna, thank you so much. And you're in Las Vegas, am I correct in saying?
Yes.
So how are things in Las Vegas? Is things getting back to normal? You know, as at least from the COVID sort of situation.
Well, they decided at the beginning of June to just open everything up, and
Right.
then they lifted the mask mandate.
Yeah.
And so it's been crazy. I mean, it's been so busy. Like people have just been waiting,
Yeah.
to get back to, you know,
Well, it
just
is
social
Vegas.
lives. So so it's got very, very busy for a couple of weeks, but then, and this is unfortunately what we were afraid of, and we suspected that as soon as everything opened up, that COVID would spike again, and it did. Within a matter of 3 weeks, it was just everywhere,
Yeah.
and we have been getting some, high cases
Right.
of infection now. So unfortunately, it's starting to look like we may have to shut down again, but hopefully not. I think they did put the mask mandate back on as of
Right.
last Friday.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think anyone wants to close down. So,
Yeah.
we're just going to have to see what happens. But
Well, I know Vegas.
mm,
It must be really hard for the entertainers out there,
it
and
has been really rough. Yeah.
so hopefully we can somehow see the light at the end of the tunnel, and everyone just kind of just be safe, whether you're vaccinated or not. Just do your best to not
Yeah,
spread this thing. You
it's
know,
true.
Luna, I just want to kind of give everyone a sort of background between us because we are friends. But I've been trying to get you on this show for quite some time, and I know you're busy. And finally, I get you on here. I don't know if you recall.
Yeah, finally.
I don't know if you recall, but it was 2019, and I performed at the Wonderground.
That's right. Yeah.
And and for everyone out there watching, I don't know if you realize how intimidating it is to perform in front of Luna Shimada.
Nah.
No, because if everyone is familiar in the Wonderground, there's a back area where you perform close up magic, and I was doing it, and I out of the corner of my eye, I knew exactly who you were. I didn't know anyone else in that crowd, but I saw you, and I saw the searing eyes like watching every single move. And I was just so nervous, and I know I mentioned this, but and in fact, I was so nervous that after I performed, we kind of saw each
It
other, and
was really funny. Yeah, because I really enjoyed your performance that night, both on the stage and at the close up. And I really appreciated, the artistic style and the presentation of what you were doing. And I wanted to tell you, so there was like a certain moment where you walked by and you gave me one of these kind of like sideways glances, like you made eye contact and then you immediately looked away and just kept walking.
I was
and I
afraid,
thought, okay, that was awkward. You know.
but
Um,
nonetheless, I was really,
so
and
you didn't like talk to me that night,
I
you just kind of walked right by and went, oh, and then walked past.
well,
So, but you did reach out to me the
yeah,
next day and you wrote me a message. So,
right, but
yeah.
give people an idea. You were surrounded by people that I also admire in magic. I think Bizarro was there, and I had seen people just talking to you, and these were names in magic. So it was. I didn't want to get slammed with criticism either. So I was
I
like,
never give critique unless I am asked. And even then, I will say, are you sure you want
Right.
my opinion?
Right. And I've gotten to know Luna, so if everyone out there realizes Luna's a great mentor because she's honest. In fact, I worked with you on one of my acts, and it's called the Music Box.
Right.
So if everyone out there always asks me about it, Luna, and I tell people the
Yeah.
idea came from Luna Shimada, and I was doing the little wicker doll from my hand, the voodoo thing.
Right.
And I remember I went to your house and I said, Luna, I want to work on this with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said, you're the first thing you said was get rid of that thing, those sticks. That was what I remember.
Yeah,
This
I was
is
like,
not
well,
working for you.
first thing we got to do is get rid of that wicker, man. Yeah.
And it began from there. And you right away said, I mean, you told me that get rid of that little voodoo man
Yeah.
and make yourself. You didn't say how, you just said make yourself a ballerina and music box because it is something that identifies with my character one, and people recognize it.
Recognize the object.
Right.
And it
right,
has usually sentimental value.
right. And
So,
so thank you for that, Luna.
no, you're welcome.
You
I
know,
think one of the most important things that I try to teach people whenever I work with them is to make them understand that, of course, it's important to perform good magic, but it's more important to create emotion
yes.
when with your magic.
I want to point out, Luna, Jeffrey Allen's out there from the American Museum of Magic. He says hello, and he says we are both his favorites, but I'm sure it's just you. But yes, if anyone is out there, and you do,
Jeffrey, always so supportive. Thank you.
Luna is you're a mentor, also a teacher, but
Yeah.
you're also a performer.
Mm-hmm.
Amongst many things that you do. For people out there who are not too familiar with your magic legacy, could you tell us just a slight gloss over about what your lineage is in magic, Luna, if you don't mind?
Okay. Well, my father's from Japan, and my mother's from Australia, and he was a magician since he was 14 years old. He was mentored by Tenyo and Tenkai.
Yeah.
If you know anything about magicians from Japan, they are legends.
Yes.
And they were his mentors. And he went on tour with a show in 1965 called Tokyo Nights. It's kind of like a takeoff of European Nights, the famous movie with Channing Pollock.
Yes.
And it was like a traveling variety show. And he went to Australia. He met my mother, who was an usher in the theater that he was working in. Yeah. So, from that moment on, it was just kind of love at first sight. And they eloped because it was shortly after the war. Right. And he was Japanese, and her father was in the military.
Right.
So that was, didn't sit well with the family. So,
of course.
So I think about 6 months, he had to go home to Japan for about 6 months, and then they came back and they got married, and they got married in October, and in December they already discovered that she was pregnant with me. Wow. So I pretty much was on board from the beginning. Yeah. And I've been on stage, since utero. And
literally
been on that journey ever since. So yeah, my parents are international magicians, world-class magicians, and they made quite a big splash and a reputation for themselves. Yeah. Through the decades, 70s, 80s. They did practically every TV show on television. They traveled all over the world. My father's won about, I think, six or seven awards from the Academy of Magical Arts.
Yes.
Plus performing fellowships and lifetime achievements. And he has, he's decorated in a way that I don't think I ever will be, but that's okay. It was his path, and he earned it, It was
Well,
he's unique in the world. Unique in the world.
not to downplay
I
your
got the benefit of being able to, be born into that, and
right.
I think the best part about all that was was the lifestyle. I got to work everywhere from circuses to cabarets to big theaters, famous venues, to the diviest clubs imaginable. But it
Well,
was all such great experience. And then the people that I got to meet and,
yeah.
the extended family, which was the culture of show business that I had the benefit of growing up in. And
I think you mentioned something. Trent Wrench, he's commenting. He says the apple doesn't fall from the tree, and you know what, Luna? I think your accomplishments, I think, are pretty heavily impacting the magic community as well. So I would not downplay it by any means. Yes, your father is a true legend in magic. So if people are out there wondering who your father is Shimada, and he is open for Liberace and also Doug Henning, to say the least. But going back to you, Luna,
yeah,
I think when I know I've heard stories of when you decided to break out in your solo career.
yeah.
Could you tell us the time when you decided to do that? What was your inspiration? What was your motivation for going out on your own in magic?
Well, like anything, it's the magic was always there for me. I wanted to learn magic when I was little, but it just never really kind of worked out with my dad and everything, you
Yeah.
know, um, learning magic. So I, of course, ended up, performing in his show as his assistant.
Yes.
And that was how I learned a lot of my skills. Being I don't think people realize just how integral a magic assistant is.
Yes.
That that when you become a magician's assistant, it's not just standing on stage and bringing props on and off. I learned how to pretty much set the entire show. I learned how to preset all the silks. I learned how to set all the props. I learned how to repair the props. I learned how to make make it so that the only thing my father had to do was walk into his dressing room 30 minutes before, put on his jacket, and load. And I did everything else.
That,
So that's what an assistant does. His assistant pretty much does all the work and then all the cleanup afterwards and the maintenance of the props. And so I learned the skills by being in the show
right.
and performing in the show with him. And so that was an integral part of my training. Now, as a young girl in magic and show business, I didn't really get out much. I was pretty much just that's all my life just revolved around the show, around my family and our contracts and our traveling. So I always had a tendency to get involved with other magicians,
Yes.
when I came of age.
Right.
So eventually I ended up marrying a magician, and we had a world class act for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And by the time, that thing ran its course, I decided that it was time for me to start performing on my own. My first thought when I went through the divorce was, oh, shoot, I got to find another magician to work for. Who am I
Right.
going to work for now? Right. And
Right.
then like 15 minutes later, I flicked myself in the head and what am I thinking? I don't need to work for another
Right.
magician. I already have all the skills. I can do this myself, you
Yes.
know? And so I called up my dad and I said, I'm going to put together my own act. And he's like, you want to do doves? And I'm like, hell no. Because the guy I was with, he was a dove act.
Yeah.
And I took care of my dad's doves. And I was like, I don't want to do birds. No
Right.
way. No way. I says, well, maybe I'll try the parasols.
Okay.
So I say, you got any extra props? So he's like, yeah, okay. So I went over to the house, and picked up a bunch of, props. He gave me a bunch of umbrellas and some silks and stuff
Right.
like that. I had no costume. I went through my wardrobe. Luckily, I had a very colorful wardrobe because we were just coming out of the 80s. So I had lots of like long, colorful coats and,
Right.
corsets and things like that. So I was able to adapt a costume, just stuff that I had in my wardrobe.
Right.
And my dad says, "Can you be ready in 3 weeks?"
Oh,
I go,
wow.
3 weeks? He goes, "Yeah, I get you." He says, "I'm going to give you your first gig in 3 weeks, the little cabaret downtown LA. I have a gig, and can you be ready to perform your act in 3 weeks?"
Oh my
So,
God.
and I was like, from scratch, okay, mind you, I had nothing,
Yes.
and I said, "Sure, okay." I took that challenge.
Right.
And then, of course, I sat there stressing about it for 2 weeks. I sat there and stared at my props for 2 weeks and went,
Right.
and then in 1 week I put the act together.
Wow.
And
That's
it and
that's
it kicked ass. I mean, it
yeah.
was, for an act, and that's how I am sometimes. Like I will
Right.
think about something, you know, and get it all worked out in my head.
Yes.
And then, because one thing that I cannot stand is working on something, without a plan
Right.
and then having it go nowhere. And now I've wasted time, I've wasted resources, you know.
Yeah.
So I have this tendency to like work it all out, map it all out in my head and draw, write things down, make lists of stuff. And, and then once I got that all figured out, then it's just a matter of putting it all together,
Now I
you
have to
know?
ask Luna, your father definitely has a very distinct style of magic, very classical,
Yeah.
very gentlemanly, but you kind of took a different direction.
Yes.
Could you
Well,
describe what that direction was at the initial stages?
well, I spent most of my early life, performing in classical acts.
Right.
Like I said, my father was a classical act. James DeMare was a classical act. It was all 1940s, 1930s, very elegant. And I knew how to do that.
Right.
I knew how to do that really, really well.
Yeah.
And, but inside, I was in my 20s and I loved, ever since I was a teenager, I loved rock and roll. I mean, I was always, my natural aesthetic when I wasn't on stage or performing was just, I was a bit of a tomboy and a bit of a rocker kid,
Yeah.
right? So it
Yeah.
was torn jeans, torn t-shirts, and just classic rock music, Zeppelin and Rush and Jeff Beck. And, those were the kind of bands and music that I loved to listen to. And Yes, groups like Yes. And so when I decided to put my act together, I wanted to perform to those kind of artists, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I went completely radically like the opposite of what I had been doing.
Yeah.
I went very edgy and I went rock and roll and I did my first zombie routine to Invisible Sun by the Police.
Right. Right.
And I think my parasol routine was, I performed to like a Rush song and there was some pieces by Yes and just all these different very progressive rock bands from the
Right.
70s and 80s and
Now
and
you're
that and that was what I was I wanted to perform in a style that inspired me
right.
that I felt excited about. It made my body move in the right way and
Yes. So
yeah.
I noticed that your parasols resemble planets. What was the inspiration by that? Was that initially how you began it as a
Well, I mean, obviously, the first set of parasols I had from my dad were traditional ones. So
right,
they had, flowers and stuff like that on them.
right,
And, but because I had this concept in my head that this was going to, that I didn't want the parasols to look like parasols
right,
because I was already back then really deeply into symbolism. And
yeah,
I wanted to tell some kind of a story with my act, even if it was subliminal and not obvious. I wanted a very specific aesthetic to
yeah,
come through. So I thought, well, I have these umbrellas, they have big, large surfaces on them. I'm going to just white them out and
Right.
paint my own artwork on them. So, I've always been sort of a new agey, sort of spiritual,
Yeah.
bohemian kind of girl, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted my act to reflect that. So I had a friend of mine who was an airbrush artist, and I took the parasols to her, and I said, can we repaint these parasols?
Right.
And I told her what I wanted. I said, I want one to have a spider web. I want one to have a sun on one, a moon on the other, right? And
Yeah.
then a yin and yang on one of them. So I had all these symbols painted on these different umbrellas. Now, as the act evolved,
Yeah.
I started adding planets into that,
Right.
because I produce a total of 8 parasols, including a very large one at the end, which I don't do at the moment, but I used to perform a very large one at the end. So it started to evolve from just being kind of a really cool sort of eclectic,
Right.
esoteric, style act that evolved into what became a creation
Right.
story.
Yeah.
And that's why the umbrellas started to become planets. So now it was sort of like the goddess, the primordial goddess coming through the void with the sun, with the fire and the smoke pouring out of her hands,
Right.
right? And I had this very like mask sort of,
That's right.
goddess looking mask on my face, and so the elements, in the hands suddenly become the sun and the moon, right?
Yeah.
Which begin the cosmos. And
Right.
then every parasol that came out then there was Jupiter, and then was Mars, and then there's Earth, and then there's, Saturn, and all the planets that just start to, create the cosmos.
Right. This is a
Yeah.
great, like, for anyone out there studying magic or beginning in magic. Your explanation of your act really shows that.
Well, and I wanted the parasol act to be very colorful, very fast paced. I
Yes.
visualized it kind of like, for me, it was because of the style and how rapid fire it was. It
Right.
was like magic martial arts,
Yes.
because it's very quick. It's a very fast paced routine, and I wanted it to be very kaleidoscopic too.
Right. And it also has meaning.
Yeah, yeah,
You're not just performing an effect or an illusion, but there's meaning behind it. And I
yeah.
think as a student, that shows that magic can be a little bit more than just an illusion. Now, Luna, is this the same act that you did at FISM? I know we talked about this
A
before.
version of it, yeah. The FISM was well, the very first act was that gig, that
Yeah.
cabaret gig my
Right.
dad did, and then I went to Japan with him, and I did that version of that act, which was very, very simple. And from that act, the director of FISM, which was going to be in Japan that year,
Yeah.
booked me to perform on the gala show at FISM. And then I got a little overambitious at that moment, because I thought to myself, "Oh shoot, it's FISM. I can't come to FISM with this little tiny, act that I threw together in like 3 weeks." And I didn't feel like it was really, good enough,
Right.
and did because it didn't feel finished. It felt like
Well, yeah,
a work in progress.
of course.
So I ended up, biting off more than I can chew, because I got over ambitious, and I built a big backdrop, and I started changing the act and
Yes.
making it more, and adding more. And I think that it turned out to be a very good act, but
Yeah.
because I had such little time to rehearse it
Right.
and really practice it and get it tight. Um, by the time I got to FISM, it was just very, very rough, you know?
Right. But I think that's a lesson in magic, that it always evolves. Your act has always
Well,
evolved.
my father said that I probably should have just gone with the act that I was booked for, you know? And
Right.
maybe in retrospect, that would have been okay. But, I always, I wanted to push myself to do something, you know, more spectacular. And I'm glad that I did. even though it was a really hard experience and a hard lesson.
Right.
I think that if I had not pushed myself to that level, I would not have gotten to the next level, you
Right.
know?
Well, speaking of
So,
which, you were booked on many. You were on the road for quite some time, and eventually you've performed at Caesar's Palace and also Moulin Rouge, and then we talked about you. You also performed for the Prince Rainier
yeah,
of
yeah.
Monaco. Could you
Yeah,
tell us?
twice. And well, in 1989, we were performing at the Loews in Monte Carlo. And
Yep.
so, we did do a command performance for Prince Rainier at the Grace Theater. So that was, and that was for a big special sort of, they do like this big magic sort of variety festival once a year. And we were there. So I got to perform for him at that time. And then I performed again for the royal family in, I was in 1996, I think it
Wow.
was, with Jeff McBride. I went there with Jeff McBride, a big tour show, and
Right.
we got to perform again in Monte Carlo for royal family.
Now,
So I've
I
always been big on collaboration, So
yes.
I've worked with a lot of different magicians also on various shows over the years.
I'm gonna pull up a picture here of you and Jeff Luna. So this
Yeah,
you guys,
that was part of the illusion show we did together. Yeah.
right? And I had heard a story once that Jeff mentioned that you were the female version of him, and that's why the collaboration works so well. And I think
Well,
that's yeah, it's true in a way. You guys are
that's
very
was really interesting was that, like I said, I had been performing with classical magicians for most of my early life, and then at a certain point, I we were in New York at this county fair, and I saw Jeff McBride perform for the
right,
first time on this outdoor stage at this festival, and I got very excited when I saw him
yes,
because at that time he was breaking new ground,
right,
right? Everybody was performing like old school back then, and then
right,
here was this kid on stage, wearing spandex and performing to rock music, and he was edgy, and his magic was edgy, with the masks and the style and everything, and I was like, now
yeah,
that right there is what I want to see, you know.
yes,
So when I put so he inspired me. I mean, I had always had the idea to perform in a modern way, but until I saw him actually do it, I didn't know how that was going to look or how that was going to be received.
yeah,
So when I started putting my own act together, a lot of that influence and those elements kind of came into play. I mean, it wasn't like him at all, but other than the fact that it was a modern style act,
right,
with
right,
rock music and stuff. So that was something that I was very excited to jump into, and I think that I reached out to him at a certain point because I said I heard about Mystery School, and
yes,
it sounded like my kind of experience. People
yeah,
were telling me crazy stories about Mystery School. Oh my God, they drum naked in the woods in the middle of the night. And I thought, sounds like my kind of gathering.
yeah,
I need to go to this thing.
absolutely.
And so I reached out to him, and I'm like, I don't know what you guys are doing out there, but I want in.
I mean, you were at the forefront all this. You're right.
Yeah.
I think Jeff really was breaking ground, and then you
So
both
he came out to Vegas to see me performing at a little venue on the strip,
right.
and he was very surprised afterwards. Like the first thing he said is, "We need to do a show together," and I'm like, "Nah, really?" And he's like, "You're like the female version of me. We're like the two sides of the same coin." He's
Oh
like,
my goodness.
and he always said, "I'm the only person he's ever met that could match him dynamically on
Yes,
stage, energetically, and
yeah,
so it seemed like a natural fit,
Yes.
to try and collaborate and do something together.
Yeah.
So we did. We did we had a wonderful show that
I
we
would
did together for a while. It's a good
if I
experience.
if I may, Luna, I would encourage everyone who hasn't seen you and Jeff's collaboration. There are videos out there, and it is an amazing performance. It is dynamic, and it is just energetic, and it is very, very
There
theatrical.
aren't any shows like that around anymore.
Not at all. And the
No,
audience
that
was
was a
huge.
thing all on its own.
Yes.
Uh,
So anyone out there, I would encourage YouTube it, check out their performance together. It was very dynamic, and I think it
mm,
was one of the historical parts of magic, because it really put it on a different trajectory out there.
yeah.
It's the first of its kind. If,
Hmm.
before I forget, Luna, Phil accurately commented here, and I know you can't really see it, but he says, "Hello, Luna. I almost don't recognize you. You look fantastic." And yes, you do. So Phil says hello.
Thank you.
always, uh, always in show mode.
Superman. Oh.
Luna, which again, your accomplishments in magic should not be shadowed by your father's, because you
Yeah.
did eventually win the World Magic Award in magic as best female magician, not to mention it's
Well,
internationally televised, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken in saying.
yeah.
Could you tell us about that?
Um, here's the thing about me. I'm not really a big like award person. I
Sure.
never really have been, and
Right.
I've never competed in competitions. Never done a competition before.
Right.
Just something about that just never really. I think it's great, don't get me wrong. I think competitions are great for young magicians, like teen magicians that are getting into the field. It
Yeah.
gives them goals. It gives them, it forces them to build their chops.
Yeah.
I think that there are great benefits, but by the time I got into magic, I was already a professional. I
Right.
came into the field as a professional.
Right.
So it never really made sense for me, you know, to go into the competition circuit or the competition field. And I don't really honestly know why I haven't won more awards or been given more awards from magic institutions or organizations. I don't care or really think about it that much
Sure.
anymore.
Right.
Um, I think that not to make it a gender thing, but I'm not the only woman in this field
Right.
that has been glossed over and gleamed over
Right.
for recognition and opportunities.
Right.
So that's something that's been a pretty consistent problem in the field. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
so that's part of it. But World Magic Awards, well, that was something that was a show that was televised, um, for a while, and I was just fortunate enough to be one of the chosen um, acts to receive that honor,
Well, I think
and it was a great experience.
you
But
deserved it. There's no doubt about it, Luna. You deserved it. Just seeing you perform and how you put things together, it truly is. It sets your magic and routines, just set you apart from just magicians in
yeah,
general. And I can comfortably say that publicly without, because we're friends or whatever.
well, it's nice to think about it that way.
Right.
I like I said, I think that awards are greatly,
Yeah.
it's a political thing mostly. You know,
Now,
a lot
outside,
of lot of awards, a lot of magicians win awards, but
right,
there are certain institutions that you have to work with or work within, um, to
right.
receive those kind of recognitions. And I've
It's
always been a little bit, underground and not so mainstream. So, um,
and there's a lesson to be learned here, that awards don't necessarily, it's not a measure for how good you
I
are.
never felt that it defined me.
Right. Right.
I've always been about the work. For me, it's always just been about, about the work, about just putting out the best work I can. But more importantly, and and maybe I'm different this way. Um, I, I've always just wanted my magic to touch people. I've
Yes.
always wanted it to be, meaningful in some way.
Yeah.
And so I've never tried to be the best, most skillful at such and such. I work hard. I build my skill sets. I do it to the best of my ability. I practice a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but I do it because I want to be the best version of myself. I
Right.
don't try to be better than anyone else or do it, I don't do it for anybody else but myself, really.
Right.
Which I always try to, explain the difference between an artist and an entertainer because they're two very distinctive kind of approaches, right? An
Yeah.
entertainer, I always said, is someone that performs for other people, right?
Yeah.
They entertain people.
Right.
And so their approach and their style and everything they do is to impress others
Yes.
and to gain that approval. Yeah. Whereas an artist performs for themselves. An artist has a story inside themselves that they are compelled to share with the audience.
Yeah.
And so, it's never about whether they, whether you're getting their approval or not. It's about whether or not you're touching them, whether they're feeling something.
Right.
My father was always an artist. He was never an entertainer. He never did anything for anybody else's pleasure but his own. It's like, this is me, this is what I do.
Right.
And because he had that sort of aloofness about him
Yes.
on stage, that intrigued people, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and that intrigued Channing. Channing was intriguing in that way too, because he never tried to go for the hey, applaud, clap, clap, clap.
Right.
That was never. They just went out on stage, both of them. I think that was what struck Channing. My dad so strongly about watching Channing when he was inspired by him was that, wow, he doesn't care whether the audience is there or not. He just does his thing, and he does it, and he's so slick, and he's so on point.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and and my father always said that, that magic, it's just like, because I watched him for so many years, worked with him for so many years, understood that feeling so well, that when you step out on stage, there's this kind of zone that you enter.
Yeah.
you know it's like a bubble. you
Yeah.
know and you're either the kind of person that is out there trying to get approval, right, and
Yeah.
performing to get everyone to respond or react to you, or you're in a bubble.
Right.
You're in a bubble, and you are in this kind of magnificent creative zone where, you're almost channeling that magic from somewhere,
Yeah.
and it's moving through you, you know
Yes.
and that's where I live. That's where I live. And
That's
so,
dreams.
you know gaining approval from others has never really been the major thing for me. you
Yeah.
know I find I'm just happy to be able to go on stage and do what I do, and being on stage is a privilege. Being able to be in my zone and share what I feel and what I do is a privilege, and that's the reward.
Yes.
That in and of itself is all the reward that I need.
I'm going to bring up a picture of you and Channing Pollock here.
Yeah.
How much of an influence was he on your life?
Well, he's somebody that's always been in my life, which was interesting. He was my father's idol. Like, he was the man that inspired my dad to get out of Japan and become a world-class international performer. But then many
Yeah.
years later, when we ended up in Hollywood, Channing saw him perform at the Magic Castle, and Channing fell in love with his act so much that he decided to become his manager. And
Wow.
so they became really, really good friends, and he was managing my father career
Yeah.
for a while. Can you imagine what a dream that must be to
I
become to be managed by your idol?
yeah. I just can't.
But
It's so
so as a child, I always knew that he was an important person in my family's life, you know?
yeah.
And there was just something so dignified about him. He was larger than life, you
Yeah.
know? But
Yes.
just the most incredibly gracious, kind man you can imagine, you know? Just he's so eloquent, you
Yeah.
know? And then when I became a teenager, when I was somewhere around 16, um, I started 16 or 17. I started going to his home in Moss Beach, which is outside San Francisco.
Yes. Where that is.
I started going to his home to visit him with my first husband.
Yeah.
And, you know, we would do the sort of sitting at the guru's feet kind of thing, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
because he was a very spiritual man.
Okay.
And he lived in this amazing house on the edge of a cliff that was completely made of glass. So you
Wow.
could see the ocean from every single room in the house. And it was, you know, very calm and very serene. His wife Corey is Chinese, so she was, you know, she was into Tai Chi, and she was, you know, they had this very spiritual lifestyle. So I would go up there. That place became my retreat. I would go up there to just, you know, decompress, and he became my spiritual mentor. You know,
I see.
we spent 2 3 days up there, and we never talked about magic, like performance magic. We talked about other types of magic.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
and so his influence on my life was huge in that regard, because I always knew that there was something more to life than just, you know, being in the rat race, you know.
Yes. Absolutely.
And he said, "So you want to be a magician, huh?" You know, and I told him, after my marriage ended and I came back to him, I was around 27. I said, "I'm going to do this on my own." Says, "So you want to be a magician, huh?" And I'm like, "Of course. What else am I going to do?" You know?
Right. Right.
And he said, "So you do know that being a magician is about being a magician 24/7. It
Ah.
doesn't just end for those after those 10 minutes on stage. You have to live a magical life. Your life has to be magic
Yeah.
24 hours a day. It is something that it is a way of life. It is a lifestyle. It is a philosophy. It's a way of looking at the world. It is a way, you know." And that was it, you know. I
Yeah.
was like, I got that. You know, he'd been grooming me since I was 17. So by then, I'd already been studying with him for 10 years, metaphysics, you know.
Wow.
And so by 27, I was ready. I was ready. So, of course, you know, I created my first act, and it had to be about creation, and it had to be about all these, you know,
Yeah.
high minded magical concepts, you know, and not just a magic trick act, you know.
Luna, it really, I could listen to your wisdom all day, and your stories have always just intrigued me. And I thought I knew a lot about, your stories, but this one really brought it home for me, because sometimes we lose our focus on why we do magic, and you kind of brought it back. We do it for the art of it, to
Yeah.
something bigger than the applause and laughter. And I can't thank you enough for coming here and sharing your thoughts, and just a little bit about you. Now, I know that you perform and you have residency at the Las Vegas Magic Theater. Is that
That's right.
we can find you there? Are you performing there every week?
Yes, I'm usually working there Wednesdays, Thursdays, but I'm going to start working more days now. So because we've had to, things have been a little bit slow with COVID and stuff. So it kind of it just sort of gauges. But we are open 7 days a week, and the Las Vegas Magic Theater is the venue. It was opened by Dirk Losander, couple of my second husband, ex-husband.
But you're still collaborating.
Me and these damn magicians. What can I say? Yes. No, we are, yes. Well, he is the father of my kids, so
right.
We are pretty solid as far as friends and friendship and stuff like that, and co-collaborators, in our work. And so we just recently, he just recently acquired a second venue.
Oh,
so there'll be 2 of them now in
Okay.
Las Vegas, which will be opening in a couple months. But we're in the Arts District, and you can find us or purchase tickets for the show at www.lasvegasmagictheatershop.com.
I put the link right there in the, they can see it, lasvegasmagictheatershop.com.
Yeah.
And if you want to see Luna live in Las Vegas, and I would encourage all of you out there watching tonight to go check Luna out and your show. It has been an amazing interview, but before we
went by very quickly.
I know.
We barely scratched the surface.
We were just getting warm too. It was just getting to that place, and it's always a wonderful, wonderful conversation with you. But I want to make sure people know where to find you, Luna. So you do have a site. I noticed. Is it Luna Shimada Magic?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's also LunaShimada.com. I have 2.
Okay, so LunaShimada.com and Luna Shimada Magic. You're also on social media, so if you're not following Luna already, she is on Facebook.
Instagram is Luna Magic 66.
Yes.
I mean, Luna Shimada 66, sorry.
Luna Shimada 66. So it's all there on the screen for everyone to see. And I forgot to mention too, Luna, let's not forget, you are going to be at the Magic Castle, Palace of Mystery, on the week of September 27th.
That's right.
So don't miss her performance. It's always amazing. And I'm going to go over here to the comment section. And I think Edward says, we'll see you in October. I think he's going down to Las Vegas, and also Jeffrey Allen. So guys, check out Luna. And once again, I need to have you come back, because we can talk so much. Obviously, I mean, we can talk. I mean, me and you, we could talk. We talk.
We always do. I mean, our phone conversations are span over hours.
I know. I think before our prep interview for this was about 2 hours. And then this was actually the short version of it. Luna, before we round it up, I do have 10 questions that I would love to ask you.
Ooh, okay, 10 questions.
The hard ones, right? But just a little background. If you've seen Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton, he's a big hero of mine in the way he hosted and asked questions. But what I found is he asked questions that were parlor questions that dated back to the Victorian era.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
And they were made popular by a man named Marcel Proust, who was a poet. So, Luna, these are 10 questions that I would love to ask you, and I hope that you enjoy. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to ask you.
Okay. I'll do my best to answer.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are the Lipton questions. Luna, the first question is, what is your favorite magic word?
My favorite magic word. Mystery.
Mystery.
Yeah.
What is your least favorite magic word?
Magic. Because people always think about magic as, oh, do you pull out rabbits? Can you saw my wife in half? Can you do this? Always provokes stupid comments. So, yes, not a big fan of that word.
Well said. Luna, what turns you on in magic?
Being fooled badly But also just someone with impeccable style
Right.
and elegance. Yeah.
What turns you off in magic, Luna?
The wise guy, the wise cracks, the standard lines, the same repetitive crap you see everybody else do.
What sound or noise in magic do you love?
I don't really know. I haven't thought about. I can tell you though what my dad's favorite sound was.
Okay, well,
Which always he loves the sound of the appearing cane when it goes crack. That, he told me, he's like, the crack sound when the cane appears.
Right.
He said that was always a magical sound to him. He loved that sound.
I think that is the most unique answer ever, right there.
And I don't know, that always stuck with me, like every time it's funny because I produce a cane in my show, but I do it silently. But he comes out on stage with his torch and then he goes, crack! And I smile every time he does that because I know that he loves that sound so much. So there you go. Anyways.
What sound or noise in magic do you hate?
Sound or noise in magic? Wow, these are hard questions. Sound or noise in magic?
That you hate.
That I hate.
Yes.
I don't like the applause prompt.
Yeah.
Every time a magician goes, hey, applaud for me, yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's cringy for me.
What is your favorite cuss word?
Motherfucker.
You say it the best. You say it the best. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I have a deep passion for writing.
Yeah.
Writing prose, writing poetry, writing spoken word, but I also love to write stories and fiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
What profession would you not like to attempt?
Not like to attempt.
Yes.
Anything that has to do with numbers. I would hate to be an accountant. Boring shit, let me tell you. Which is why I'm always late filing my taxes.
I don't think you're the only one, Luna. And finally, our very last question of the night. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
God damn, you made some waves, but was a good time, wasn't it?
Luna, it is always a pleasure to talk to you and just hear your thoughts. I know we didn't cover everything, and I plan to, but this gives us a good reason to come back and make another interview and to talk. Luna, is there any
We're going to need to do an entire series here.
we need to do like
Luna's early years. Luna and her men. That's an entire topic all by itself.
Oh, Luna. It truly is a pleasure. Luna, is there any last thoughts that you want to give to the audience before we close it out tonight?
Oh.
Anything you want to say?
Yeah, whether you're a professional or a hobbyist or just want to do magic to entertain your friends, give a piece of yourself to the performance. Make it personal. Make it personal. Things have changed now. Things are different. People need connection more now than ever because we live in such a disconnected, impersonal world. And even though we have access to everybody and everything through these devices,
Yeah.
there's still something missing, right? So whenever you have the opportunity to share magic with somebody, make sure that you make it personal.
Yeah.
Make it really personal. Don't forget to go. Don't be afraid to go there.
Luna,
That's my advice.
You always know how to make it fun, but you always know how to make it serious when it needs to be. And that pretty much sums up this interview. I learned a lot, and I always enjoy your stories. And I can't thank you enough just as a friend, and also your contributions in magic, because you truly are a legend to me, and I'm sure many people out there. So once again, thank you for coming on. And to everyone out there, my name is Chris Herren as Faust. I hope you enjoyed. And this is the legendary Luna Shimada. Good night, everyone.